My name is Margaret Ellison, though most people just call me Maggie. I've been many things in my 61 years. Mother, grandmother, Sunday school volunteer, the dependable neighbor with extra sugar to lend. But the title I wore the longest, the one that shaped nearly every breath I took, was wife. For 38 years, I was the wife of Richard Ellison. To the outside world, Richard was a man worth admiring, successful in his career as a financial advisor, charming with neighbors, always the one who bought the first round of drinks at gatherings. He had that sort of confident smile people trusted, even when they probably shouldn't. When I first met him, he was 30, I was 23, and the world felt wide open. He swept me off my feet with dinner dates I could barely afford on my own salary, surprise flowers on my doorstep, and long phone calls that stretched until dawn. He had ambition, and I had patience. He had charm, and I had steadiness. Together, we felt unstoppable. Or at least I thought we were. Our first apartment was nothing more than a drafty one-bedroom above a laundromat in Cincinnati, Ohio. I can still remember the rumble of washing machines beneath our floor and the scent of detergent that clung to everything we owned. Richard would joke that at least our clothes never smelled bad, and I'd laugh, believing we were building something bigger together. Back then, he didn't mind my quiet ways. He said I balanced him, that I made him calmer, more grounded. And I believed him. I was proud to be the one who smoothed the edges of his fire. We saved every penny, moved into a starter home, had 2 children, Emily and Joshua. And for years, I threw myself into raising them. Richard worked long hours, often late into the night, but I never questioned it. I packed school lunches, sewed Halloween costumes, and made our home the kind of place where the lights glowed warm from the street. People used to tell me how lucky I was to have a husband like Richard, handsome, hardworking, generous in public. And I nodded, smiling, never letting on how different the man was behind closed doors. The cracks in our marriage weren't sudden explosions. They were whispers, offhand comments, small dismissals that grew sharper with age. I remember one Thanksgiving when I was 35. I had spent 2 days cooking. Pies, stuffing, turkey, potatoes, the works. Family gathered around, laughing, eating, praising the meal. And then Richard, with that charming grin, raised his glass and said, "To my wife, the best homemaker in Ohio. She may not understand my business, but she sure can make a pumpkin pie." Everyone chuckled, even clapped. I smiled, cheeks burning, because what else could I do? But later, as I scraped cranberry sauce from plates in the quiet kitchen, I thought, why did that feel more like a cage than a compliment? That was Richard's way. Every kindness carried a barb, every praise wrapped in diminishment. "You don't need new dresses, Maggie. Who are you trying to impress? Don't bother with that book club. Half the time you don't even understand what they're talking about. Travel, that's for people with energy. You just get worn out." And I, ever the peacemaker, swallowed it all. I told myself he was tired, that he didn't mean it. I folded my feelings into neat little boxes and tucked them away, just like I tucked away the dream I'd carried since girlhood: to travel. Italy had been mine since I was 12. My father, who worked construction all his life, once brought home a coffee table book filled with glossy photographs of Europe. The canals of Venice, the vineyards of Tuscany, the ruins of Rome. It was another world, and I devoured every page. As a teenager, I taped pictures of Florence's Duomo above my bed. As a newlywed, I told Richard, "One day we'll go there together." He laughed, kissed my forehead, and said, "Sure, Maggie, one day." But one day kept being postponed, first for bills, then for the kids, then because Richard said travel was impractical. So instead, I made do with gardening, planting tulips every spring, pretending I was strolling through Italian fields instead of kneeling in Ohio soil. Still, the dream lingered, a fragile, stubborn hope. It was at a family dinner, not too long ago, when the dream finally soured. I was 60 then, Emily and Joshua grown with children of their own, and I had just finished describing to them how I still longed to see Italy. I painted the picture so vividly that for a moment I could almost taste the wine. Richard leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Italy is not for the old. Maggie would just slow me down."
The laughter around the table was polite, awkward, but it burned in my ears like thunder. I forced a smile, blinking quickly to hold back tears. That night, I locked the bathroom door, pressed a towel to my mouth, and wept so no one would hear. It wasn't just a joke. It was the truth he believed, that I was too old, too slow, too small, that my dreams no longer mattered. After that, his comments sharpened, like knives he didn't bother to hide. "You don't need that book. Stick to magazines. You'll get lost if you travel without me. Don't start a new hobby, you'll quit halfway anyway." And always there was his secretary, Lena Carter. She was half my age, with sharp heels and sharper lipstick, orbiting him at work events, her hand always brushing his arm. I'd told myself I was imagining things, that Richard, for all his flaws, wouldn't betray me. Not after decades of building a life together, of raising children, of surviving illnesses and mortgages and funerals. But in my heart, I knew. The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was physical. His late nights, his sudden gym membership, the way he guarded his phone like it was gold. I became a shadow in my own home, the wallpaper, the background noise. And yet still, I dreamed of Italy. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I was folding laundry, humming to myself, when Richard came in briskly, loosening his tie. He barely looked at me, muttered something about deadlines, and then he said it. "I'll be out of town for 2 weeks. Italy. Meetings. Don't wait up." The word Italy hit me like a blow. My Italy. The dream I'd begged for, saved for, whispered about. He said it as casually as if he were going to the grocery store. I steadied my voice. "Italy? Since when are you going to Italy?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Work. You wouldn't enjoy it. Too much walking, too much noise. You'd get tired." I stood frozen, dish towel in my hand, staring at him. For decades, I'd accepted his little cruelties. But this wasn't just a joke. This was theft. And that night, as I overheard his soft, playful voice on the phone saying her name, Lena, the truth crystallized. He wasn't going to Italy for work. He was going with her. I didn't cry this time. No, I felt something else settle over me. Not despair, not weakness, but clarity. For the first time in decades, I understood the marriage I had sacrificed everything for was already gone. And perhaps, just perhaps, I wasn't too old to start acting for myself. The morning after Richard announced his business trip to Italy, I stood at the kitchen window, staring at the frost curling along the glass. The world outside looked brittle, like it might shatter if touched too roughly. My hands trembled as I poured coffee into Richard's favorite mug, the one our daughter Emily had painted when she was 8, its glaze uneven, its handle chipped. He didn't notice as he gulped it down, muttering about meetings, barely looking at me. Once, his indifference would have gutted me, but now I felt something else brewing, something sharp. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a woman about to uncover the truth. For years, I'd ignored the whispers, the late nights, the cologne that wasn't mine, the work dinners that stretched until 2 a.m. I'd told myself I was imagining things, that suspicion was uglier than silence. But Italy, that was different. Italy was mine. So I did something I'd never done before. I called his office. "Hello, this is Margaret Ellison," I said, my voice steady, though my hands shook. "Could I speak to Lena Carter, please?" There was a pause. Then a receptionist replied, "Oh, Mrs. Ellison, Lena's not in today. She's on vacation." "Vacation?" My throat tightened. "For how long?" "2 weeks. She said she'd be traveling abroad." Abroad. The world tilted. The puzzle pieces clicked together with a sickening finality. Richard wasn't going on a business trip. He was going on our dream trip with her. That night, when Richard came home, I almost confronted him. I almost shouted, almost threw plates, almost demanded to know how he could betray me after nearly 34 years of marriage. But when I saw him standing there, loosening his tie with that smug smile, I stopped myself. Why? Because for the first time in years, I realized shouting wouldn't change him. Pleading wouldn't bring back the man I'd once loved. No. If I wanted justice, if I wanted revenge, I needed proof. And proof I would get.
My daughter Emily came by the next day with her 2 little ones in tow. She noticed immediately that something was wrong. "Mom, you're pale," she said, brushing crumbs off the counter while her kids ran circles around the kitchen. Is everything okay?" I opened my mouth to tell her, to spill everything. But then I closed it. Not yet. Emily adored her father. Joshua did too. If I told them now, without proof, they might think I was being dramatic, paranoid. So instead, I forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired." But as I watched her herd the kids into the living room, laughter echoing down the hall, I felt a pang of determination. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing this for her, for my children who deserved to know the truth about the man they idolized. Richard kept his passport in the desk drawer of his study. For years, he'd been careless, assuming I'd never look. But that night, after he went to bed, I slipped quietly into the room, my heart pounding like a drum. The drawer slid open with a faint squeak, and there it was, his passport. I flipped it open, and my breath caught. Inside, tucked neatly between the pages, was a folded airline itinerary. 2 tickets, business class, destination, Rome. Passenger names? Richard Ellison, Lena Carter. My fingers trembled as I traced the letters. My husband, my partner of nearly 40 decades, was taking another woman on the trip I'd dreamed of my whole life. The tears threatened to spill, but I swallowed them down. Not this time. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. As I slid the passport back into place, a plan began to form. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't let him know I had discovered the truth. Instead, I would wait, watch, collect every piece of evidence I needed. And then, when the time was right, I would take everything from him. His pride, his comfort, his reputation, and maybe, just maybe, I would take back my dream of Italy too. The days leading up to Richard's business trip passed like a slow funeral march. He strutted around the house, humming as he packed, while I kept my silence. Every time he stuffed a crisp shirt into his suitcase, I imagined tearing it in half. Every time he checked his phone, smiling at some hidden message, I pictured smashing it against the wall. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled when he looked my way. I kissed his cheek goodnight. I played the part of the dutiful wife one last time, because I knew every lie he told me, every glance he sneaked at his phone, every smug smirk was another piece of evidence I was tucking away for later. What Richard didn't know was that while he packed, I was preparing too. Not clothes, not passports, but weapons. I bought a small leather notebook from the corner store. On the cover, I wrote just one word: truth. Every night when he fell asleep, I filled its pages. Dates, times, phone numbers I recognized from his call log, receipts I quietly pulled from his pockets, copies of the itinerary I scanned at the library, careful not to leave a trace. I became a detective in my own home, piecing together the life he thought he could hide from me. And with each entry, I felt myself growing stronger. The morning Richard left, he kissed me on the cheek and said, "Don't wait up, Maggie. Enjoy your quiet time." Quiet time, as though I were some old widow he was leaving behind with a cup of tea and a crossword puzzle. I waved from the porch as he drove away, my face calm, my heart pounding. The second his car turned the corner, I went inside, shut the door, and whispered to myself, "Now it begins." For the first few days, I tracked him from home. He posted nothing, of course. Richard was too careful for that. But Lena wasn't. On the third night, Emily came over, scrolling through her phone while the kids played. "Mom, look at this," she said, tilting the screen. There it was, a photo of Lena Carter standing in front of the Trevi fountain, her smile wide, her caption dripping with romance. "Dreaming in Rome with someone who makes my heart sing." She didn't tag him, but she didn't have to. I knew. And as I stared at the glowing screen, something inside me hardened. 2 days later, Richard called. His voice was smooth, casual. "How's everything back home, Maggie?" "Quiet," I said softly, masking the storm beneath. "How's the business trip?" "Oh, exhausting. Meetings, dinners, you know the drill." I almost laughed. The gall of him. The man who couldn't remember to buy milk was suddenly the busiest executive in Rome. "Well," I said gently, "don't work too hard." When I hung up, my hand was shaking. Not with sadness, but with fury. He still thought I was blind. He still thought I was weak. He had no idea I was documenting every lie. That night, I pulled out the old scrapbook I'd made in my 20s, filled with magazine cutouts of Italy, Venice, Florence, Tuscany. Dreams that had been laughed at, diminished, shoved into a dusty box. I stared at those pictures for hours. And then, slowly, a thought crept in. Why should they get to claim Italy? Why should they taint the dream I'd carried for nearly 50 years? Maybe revenge wasn't just about destroying Richard. Maybe it was also about reclaiming myself. A week into his trip, Emily returned, this time without the kids. She set her purse on the counter, her eyes sharp. "Mom?" she said quietly. Is he with someone?" The question pierced me. My lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, I whispered, "Why do you ask?" She slid her phone across the table. Another photo of Lena, this time at a candlelit restaurant in Florence. "She's been posting nonstop," Emily said, her voice trembling. "And Dad told me he was in Milan for meetings." "That's not Milan, Mom. That's Florence." My heart broke a little in that moment. Not just for me, but for my daughter. Seeing her father's mask slip. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Sweetheart, trust me. Everything will come to light soon." She searched my face, confusion flickering, but she didn't press further. And that night, I wrote in my notebook, "My children will see the truth with their own eyes. And when they do, I will be ready." It was Emily who brought me the photograph that ended all doubt. She came over on a Saturday afternoon, her face pale, her phone clutched in her hand like it was something dangerous. She didn't speak at first. She just handed it to me. I took it, my heart heavy, and looked. There they were, Richard and Lena, my husband of 38 years and his secretary, arm in arm, smiling at the camera, standing beneath the shadow of the Colosseum in Rome. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My eyes stung, but no tears came. I had cried too many times before. This time, I felt only steel. Emily's voice was soft. "Mom, what are you going to do?" I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and when I opened them, my voice was calm. I'm going to let him bury himself. My son Joshua, on the other hand, wasn't so quick to believe. When Emily told him, he called me the next evening, his voice edged with disbelief. "Mom, come on, Dad wouldn't, he's not that kind of man." I let out a bitter laugh. "Joshua, your father has been that kind of man for a long time. You've just never wanted to see it."
There was silence on the line. Then he muttered, "Even if it's true, we shouldn't jump to conclusions." "Conclusions?" My voice sharpened. "Joshua, he's in Rome with another woman. He lied to me. He lied to you. He lied to all of us." Still, my son clung to denial, and I realized then Richard's charm wasn't just for strangers. It had wrapped around our children, too, binding them in loyalty. But soon they would see. 2 weeks later, Richard returned. I stood at the kitchen counter when he walked in, suitcase in hand, a tan on his face. He kissed my cheek as though nothing had happened, as though he hadn't spent the last 14 days parading another woman through the streets of Rome. "How was it?" I asked, my voice steady. "Exhausting," he sighed, loosening his tie. "Meetings all day, every day. Hardly got to see the city at all." The lie slipped so easily from his lips that I almost admired it. Almost. But I didn't challenge him. Not yet. Instead, I nodded, smiled, and brought him dinner. Because I wanted him comfortable, I wanted him smug, I wanted him blind to the storm brewing right under his roof. That night, as he showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen. Lena Carter. I didn't answer, but when the shower stopped, I heard him hum, the same hum he used when we first met, when he thought the world belonged to him, and I knew with bone-deep certainty that he believed I was still my silent, obedient wife. He was wrong. A week after his return, Richard suggested hosting a dinner party. "It's been too long since we entertained," he said, pouring himself a glass of wine. "Invite Emily and Joshua, maybe some neighbors. I want things to feel normal again." Normal. I agreed, because I saw an opportunity. That Saturday, the table gleamed with polished silverware, the air thick with roasted garlic and rosemary. Emily and Joshua sat across from their father, watching him with cautious eyes. Richard laughed, poured wine, told stories about business meetings in Milan. And then Emily spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it sliced through the laughter like a blade. "Funny, because I saw a picture of the Colosseum behind you, Dad." The room went silent. Richard froze, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second, before he chuckled. "Oh, that must have been between meetings. Just a quick tourist stop." Joshua shifted uncomfortably. Emily's eyes narrowed. And me? I just smiled, sipping my wine, letting the tension coil tighter and tighter, because I knew this was only the beginning.
The next morning, while Richard slept soundly beside me, I logged on to the old desktop computer he rarely touched anymore. I had memorized his passwords over the years. He thought me too simple, too uninterested to ever notice everything. But I noticed everything. And there it was, a hidden bank account, withdrawals, hotel bookings, jewelry purchases, all linked to Lena Carter. My breath caught. For years, I had clipped coupons, stretched pennies, made do, and all the while, Richard had been funneling money into another woman. I printed every record, every statement. I slid them into the back of my notebook, the one labeled Truth. The file was growing. The case was building. Soon, I would have enough to ruin him. That night, as Richard slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The man who had belittled me, who had stolen my dream, who had paraded his affair like a prize, was snoring softly, believing he was untouchable. And I realized revenge wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a promise. I turned to look at him, the lines of his face etched in moonlight. You think you've won, but you've underestimated me the last time. It was a Tuesday evening when Richard stumbled into the house late, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his. He dropped his briefcase by the door, loosened his tie, and muttered something about working late. I had stopped waiting up for him years ago, but this time I watched him carefully as he poured himself a drink. His smirk, his careless arrogance. It was the same as always, but in my hands, tucked beneath the folded dish towel, was a folder filled with everything. The receipts, the photos, the bank account statements. And I knew tonight was the night I stopped being silent. It began small. At breakfast the next morning, I set the folder on the table in front of him. He blinked, confused, then opened it. I watched his face pale as he flipped through the pages. The photos of him and Lena, the credit card charges, the secret account. He looked up at me, jaw tight. Where did you get this? From the man who thought I wasn't paying attention, I said calmly, sipping my coffee. For once, Richard had no quick retort. No laugh, no excuse. His mouth opened, then closed again. I leaned forward, my voice steady. You've taken my life, Richard, my dreams, my dignity, but you won't take my future. And with that, I stood, leaving him with his lies. A week later, I made my move. Richard had a company dinner, the kind where he thrived, standing tall in his expensive suits, charming investors with his practiced grin. I arrived uninvited, walking into the glittering hotel ballroom with my head high. Gasps rippled through the crowd, the loyal wife appearing where no one expected. When Richard spotted me, his face drained of color. "Maggie, what are you?" But I cut him off. Calmly, without raising my voice, I laid the evidence on the table in front of his colleagues. The affair, the money, the deception. The room fell silent. Then came the whispers, the stares, the phones flashing as people snapped photos. Richard's empire didn't collapse with a bang, but with the quiet shame of exposure. And as he stood frozen, humiliated, I turned and walked away, leaving him to choke on the ruins of his reputation. The legal battle was brutal, but I came prepared. I had every receipt, every statement, every lie documented in my notebook. Richard fought, of course. He raged, he threatened, he tried to paint me as a bitter old woman, but the evidence was undeniable. In the end, the court sided with me. The house, a share of his accounts, and, with poetic justice, half of the secret fund he had been using to spoil Lena. For the first time in decades, I had money that was mine. Freedom that was mine. But revenge isn't just about money. It's about justice. Lena, the woman who thought she had stolen my husband, quickly discovered what kind of man Richard really was. When the money dried up and his reputation shattered, so did her affection. She left him within months, trading him for another wealthy man. And Richard? He was left alone, bitter, forgotten. A man with no wife, no mistress, no legacy. I had taken everything he valued, not with violence, not with screaming, but with truth, the very thing he thought I could never wield. 6 months later, I stood in Florence, Italy, gazing up at the Duomo I had once taped above my childhood bed. The air smelled of fresh bread and stone warmed by centuries of sun. For the first time, I wasn't imagining it. I was here. Alone, yes, but not lonely. Because this wasn't Richard's Italy. It wasn't Lena's Italy. It was mine. I sipped espresso in a small cafe, the leather notebook resting on the table beside me. Its pages were full. The story of betrayal, the proof of deceit, the blueprint of revenge. And on the last page I wrote just one line. He underestimated me. He will never do it again. And so after 38 years of silence, I finally found my voice, not in his shadow, but in the light of my own freedom. Richard Ellison lost everything. And I finally won.